views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
The aftermath of every social revolution brings about change. Cultural norms and landmarks shift as our minds and hearts expand beyond the familiar. To everything, there is a season and a time to every purpose in the land of the living. This is our time to renew, revive, and restore the hope lost of life. This is our time to dig again and rebuild from the storms of our past on a solid footing that holds. Welcome to The Foundation.
The Foundation with Hard Grant is brought to you by Alive, Bahamas Bus and Truck, Burger King, Commonwealth Bank, the Digital Transformation Unit, Davinia Grill Foods, Marco's Pizza, Mobile Garage Technologies, Platinum Pastries, Popeyes, Scotiabank, and Wendy's.
It's the foundation. Foundation. Oh, so it's the foundation. Foundation. Oh, so it's the foundation.
It's the foundation that's rocking the nation. Howard Grant's the host, Guardian radio station. 96.9, 12 to 2 is the time. You can call the show or use the text line. Yeah, he educates, he informs. He goes against the norm. He's really got that zeal. Plus, he's a child of God.
Foundation. It's the foundation. Foundation. So it's the foundation. Foundation. So it's the foundation. Foundation. So it's the foundation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 96.9 FM radio. Howard Grant in your company, The Foundation. On this beautiful day, man, thank you so much for tuning in with us. We're so happy to have you in the house, really being able to chop down. I made some commitments to you, and today is that day that decency has shown up. I mean, talk to me. This is a very exciting thing. Talk to me. And so I'm very excited to be able to have this conversation. I'm always excited to talk with my guy. He told me don't call him Mr. Bo, right? But definitely I'll let you know exactly who he is. Before we get into that, let me just be able to thank those persons that sponsors the show and remains committed to kind of doing some stuff with us. So we thank you so very kindly for being a part of that. We also want you to be able to ensure that you pick up the Guardian newspaper. Today's Tuesday, April 18th. Pick it up. The Prime Minister, we must act to deal with the crime crisis. This is a trending concept, an idea that's continuing to be yielded and kind of thrusted upon us out here. The idea that everything must be able to be affixed, this concept of crisis behind it. This is bananas. Let's talk about it. This is bananas. This is what we've come accustomed to socially and amalgamated our minds to and accordance to what we're seeing would happen, what we see happen socially, but locally, right? And we've never labeled it. When it started to see the significant influx and increase in crime, and the fear of crime index significantly increased, there was never a label of crisis associated with it. Now we see our Prime Minister being able to take on this kind of a position to talk about this crisis. Whilst I may agree with him, is this just another form of being able to articulate and sensationalize a particular concept to give you this sort of an idea that this administration has a desire to be able to rectify those things? It is bananas. Some of the same languages used with the healthcare system. This is bananas. We're going to talk about those things and kind of chop it down today. Man charged with double murder. He's here and you can be able to read the story in the paper and see exactly what's up. Police probing a leak of crime scene photos from the double murder. The information's in there. Make sure you do that. The wrote is in the paper today. The ministry out of the office of the Prime Minister, the Minister of the Office of the Prime Minister, he says, no issue with raising retirement age, right? Last time we spoke with him, or last time we heard from him in an official capacity talking about the $40-some million out of NIB, and indicated in that article, you can pick it up and look back at the Nassau Guardian, with us. Talk to me. Now we're seeing a different position to talk about the fact that no issues with raising retirement age. We got to be able to figure out how we can be able to modify to find a true sense of growth. Before I go on, I want to be able to say happy birthday to my son, my first son. Destin Grant. This is my good, decent son. I love him very much. He's 17 years old today. So if any numbers are being distributed and played according, make sure you come check Howard. Amen. Nothing about leave it in the envelope downstairs. He is 17th on the 18th. I don't know you all just call it 4-ball no more. But make the thing happen. You can pay bills and put something in my pocket. Praise God. I don't do it, but I'm not fighting you. It's a beautiful day, ladies and gentlemen. I want to be able to thank you so much for tuning in. I don't have much time with my guests, so I want to be able to kind of dive right into the conversation. Now, this guest is the head of Fidelity. The CEO of Fidelity. He's always been able to talk with strength and articulation about our economic situation in the country and what needs to happen. He's really been a proponent for the past few years about the National Development Plan and what needs to happen thereof. But there's some things that are happening locally, and I just wanted to know whether or not to talk about some things as it relates to our socioeconomic growth and or lack thereof, whether it's stagnation. I wanted to talk about our political convictions and whether or not the decisions that our politics or the administration, this administration and others, are making to stop us from getting to where we need to be. And then I also want to be able to talk about the social position and being able to understand in this sort of an alert manner and what the young kids will call woke, whether or not we are awoken to this sort of an idea and concept that there may be things crumbling around us. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to none other than who I believe to be top tier and the highest pinnacle as it relates to economic conversation for the development of the country, none other than Gowan Bowe. My brother, good afternoon. How you doing today? You're far. You press mute on your thing?
Yeah, but it should be all right. You hear me?
I got you now. How you doing today, my brother?
Yeah, man, doing well. And you must have made a call upstairs because it is a beautiful day on the outside.
It's a beautiful day, man.
When you saw all the rain and the flooding and the rising tides that took place over the last few days, boy, that was an ominous precursor to our talk today. But the sun is shining. All is well in Bahama land. So
I hope that too is an indication of though we go through trial and tribulation, we will come out on the other side. Listen, my Gowan, I did some. I want to start it off, and I want to be decent. I am putting out my blueprint for change. Now, I also downloaded all the information as it relates to the National Development Plan, and from 2016. You guys have been really working on that and developing it. You had the pillars there. I read all your pillars, the concepts and ideas, because every time you and I talk, we find our way into this concept and idea of the National Development Plan. The Progressive Liberal Party, this administration, without going into politics, we know that this administration must carry out its agenda. And in the agenda, they gave us a blueprint for change that spoke about these particular things as it relates to the new day, right? So it starts to talk about recovery. It starts to talk about these things and talk about rescuing the economy. And one of the things is they gave us a couple bullet prints. They said they're going to deal with economic reform, debt management, fiscal responsibility, stabilize the public finance, ease of doing business, financial services. So they gave us a gamut of things that here what they intend to do, and they kind of laid it out real nice for us. But I want to talk to you about whether or not this is in tandem with the NDP plan, the National Development Plan. And we know that this administration or the former administration for the PLP actually instituted this concept or gave way for this to be structured. Is there any significant movement with the National Development Plan being able to come to life and us being able to see those things here in our society on a day-to-day basis as we speak right now?
You know, candidly put, there's been a lot of chatter by the Prime Minister in terms of wanting to reconstitute the National Development Plan Secretariat and Steering Committee, but there has not been, what I'm going to say, the tangible moves to put the resources, people, and minds together in order to do so. I am always hopeful and optimistic that, shall we say, politics get set aside for the greater good of our national progress. You referred to the blueprint, and we have the other political parties with their various paraphernalia. And, you know, what is always very interesting, and I think, you know, happy to give credit to the fact that all of them will say that they've taken pieces from the National Development Plan. But, you know, the last time I checked, right? There wasn't an ability to be half pregnant, right? You couldn't say, well, I took the baby but not having the labor. I took the end result but not going through the labor pains. And I use that analogy because really when you're talking about national development, you can't pick bespoke areas. And there's a reason why the development plan had 4 pillars. You started by saying, what about the socioeconomic conditions that we live in today and those aspects that may not be empirical and may not be financial and economic, but contribute to it. So when we talk about education, we talk about health, 2 of the largest ministries that consume resources from the government that have the least amount of direct contribution into those socioeconomic matters. And so we have to appreciate that all things must work together, and us picking out what I'm going to call the highlights or the sound bites that most appeal to the electorate may serve well on the campaign trail, but it isn't a recipe for our generational success. And we have to stop thinking in short-term periods of 5 years and start thinking about how do I make it better for the next generation. And that's what the National Development Plan, which was effectively a 25-year plan. It was 2040. It really initiated in 2014. It went through so much in terms of research, but it was intended to be that would carry us for the next 25 years. And that's why it's called Vision 2040. But the reality is, when you started the exercise, you realize how much we didn't know and how much we needed to put thought into the strategy going forward.
You know what I thought was peculiar? As ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't have an opportunity, you have to check this out. Vision2040bahamas.org. Vision2040bahamas.org. You can be able to see it, and all the information is in there. And what I thought was peculiar, you have a frequently asked question segment. And I kind of perused it and looked through it. And one of the things that actually popped out to me was that it says, it asked about the political agenda. Does why does the national need a national plan? So why does the Bahamas need a national plan, and actually whether or not there is a political agenda associated with this? I'm going to ask you that. I'm going to ask you because I know you have sort of an answer to it. And it says, is the National Development Plan part of a political agenda? And then it actually give us a sort of a breakdown. But I want to ask you, because we know the nature of politics in our country. We know that the agenda needs to be able to prop up and kind of give light to any political organization that actually put it forward. Organizations need to be able to say that we've done that, I've done that, this organization has done those particular things. And whilst this seemed to be part and parcel separate from any political organization, is those elements kind of coming to the forefront of it, or is it suppressed enough that we can be able to see a nationalistic voice coming to the front?
The best persons to answer that would be our former political leaders and current political leaders, and at the very top. But I'll answer from my vantage point that unfortunately we have not matured as a society sufficiently amongst our political directorate to appreciate that, as one of the former prime ministers, very gregarious characters said, some will sow and some will reap. But I think when you look at the National Development Plan, and if mature, cool heads prevail, we would understand Vision 2040, how many political cycles will be covered in that? Mm-hmm. And the reality is that if we are talking about, 5 political cycles, and we can set aside, our philosophical differences, of which I will be the first to say that, philosophically, our political parties do not have a great differentiation. They will crucify me for saying that, but the 2 major parties are what I would call try to be center. They really are not as clear cut as they were traditionally in their philosophies, and want to be capitalists when things are good, but socialists when things are difficult.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
You can't be all things to all people, and you have to pick a course. But it doesn't mean that we could have the same ideology, but we may be better at executing. And so that's where, when we look at the National Development Plan, I think one of the most positive elements in terms of the work that was done was seeing the national response to it. even the greatest of critics in our own communities were, you say the term woke, they were actually inspired to say, well, okay, we finally have work that is going to carry us forward for a generation and not simply a political cycle. It included all political parties. Yes, there was a government at the time that initiated the process, but there were no politicians that were a part of the steering committee. There were no aspects that were being driven in terms of saying a particular administration. It really had all of the political parties being brought together for the ideas, inputs, and taking really the contributions from Bahamians at large. And so if you looked at it, my personal view is the political party that is going to have the greatest success in the future in our country, because we've seen every election cycle now since, 2002, we've had a change in government, every election cycle. And the reality is, because each time the political parties go onto the campaign trail and promise what they will do over the next 5 years, and when you look back at how much of that promise have they met, wanting and short, and so there's a change. Whereas if you say this is a national initiative that says we will now compete not on what our national priorities are, because I think as a country we probably have great consensus in that, but which one of us is better suited to execute on the plan versus us being different in terms of what we're going to do. When you look at the political paraphernalia, do they really say anything different from one another?
No.
It's just presented in a different format and delivered in a manner that says, I'm going to wipe every tear from every eye. I'm going to be all about trusted leadership. It's all buzzwords as opposed to there being a philosophical difference.
It's really
right?
saying Moses lives here, Jesus lives here, we are your saviors. In so many words, they construct this sort of an idea that says to you, you can be assured that we will alleviate you. But beyond this sort of a theory, the practical application is the exact same thing for both political organizations.
And I would say to you, want political leaders to be actually the ones that are driving the engine when they are there, but for a finite period. We have, a civil service that we need to be enhancing, strengthening, and more importantly, growing the institutional capacity of these institutions so that they are actually executing continuously. And there's a reason why they're called permanent secretaries. There's a reason why the public service is in a manner expected to be that whilst there will be political change, ultimately there's going to be continuity in the execution of strategies that are taking place. And, the best way of me summarizing where we are today, did it take us 5 years to get where we are? And so therefore, realistically, it can be turned around in 5 years? Or has it been since independence that we've sort of built the national debt that we confront? It's been since independence. And I use by virtue of that's when we no longer had a motherland to turn to. So when we took it all on ourselves very bravely, when we look at our education system, when we look at our crime situation, when we look at our health situation, did all of the factors we face today sort of come about in the last 5 years, or have they been over one or more generations? And so when we're talking about reversing the course, is it likely we can do so in 1 year or even 5 years?
It's impossible.
And if we can't, then why sell that dream? And to the point that you made,
because
yes, it's always
there's recipients to purchase that dream. There are recipients that wait eagerly to purchase this particular dream.
Well, they want to believe it because they're saying, we take away personal responsibility when we do that. When we say, don't worry about it, I got this, then you are actually allowing a person to absolve themselves of their personal responsibility to contribute towards its development. And so we have to stop this idea that our political directorate will solve the problems. What we are asking you to do is take charge, corral all of the input, devise a strategy, and then come back to us and say, how are we all going to contribute towards its success?
That's your social policy from the NDP plan. The social policy, and ladies and gentlemen, I just got a text. It says, Howard, where can I find the National Development Plan? Just go on, like I said, Vision 2040 Bahamas.org, all one word, Vision 2040, you'll be able to pick it up. Now, social policy starts to talk about, in a small nation like the Bahamas, we must all work together to improve our society. The National Development Plan will outline the policies our country needs to improve the things our citizens value most, like public safety, healthcare, education, and social services. Through strong social policies, we can better develop into a more vibrant nation and ensure each and every Bahamian is a productive and contributing member of society. Is this, like the fellas call me, idealistic in its approach? Is this idealistic, knowing that the conditioning that we exist under? Talk to me, Gowan. Let's do this.
Yep. You know, and I will say to you that the answer is yes, because we sometimes forget from whence we came. And when I say that, if you think about the Bahamas, just in the 20th century, so in the 1900s, when you and I were born, right? So people will say, what? People were born in the 1900s? But, you know, the reality is, how many of the societies and communities work together in order to bring forth change and to bring forth prosperity? When you talked about the taxi movement, when you talked about the people-to-people programs, when you talked about ACE taking a village to raise a child, did we not at one time, even in me and your living memory, see that taking place in our society? And the answer was yes.
I like this. I like this, Gowan. I can do this to you. I want to do this. That was as a result of a clear segregation. That was as a result unifying the us against them. The us had to unify to find a way to survive, to get what we identify the them had. Now watch me. For us to be able to get a house, we recognized that we couldn't walk into the bank and get these things, so we created a system that came with us from the motherland that says if we contribute collectively, this is where the community has divided. The democracy or independence that we now share and celebrate on its 50th year this year, the jubilee that we celebrate, has really broken up the community that existed here prior. And that's what I wanted to be able to see in the NDP plan. How do we pull back the community? There needs to be a very strong message, and I'm really hoping that political organizations recognize the importance of these things, but I kind of deduce it unto itself and look at it and say to myself, they're really thriving off of the segregation and separation that exist here. So why would they? Why would they encourage us to unify?
You know, and I think selfish motive and you know, persons may be offended by that, but if you come in and be reelected as opposed to how do I leave a legacy, I think then you see the differentiation. If your view is that I am here for a short period of time, but I will be do my uttermost best to ensure that when I've left, whilst my name may no longer hang on the desk in the halls of Parliament, that the mark that I made will live on, even if it is in programs that do not give me the recognition that I'm due. If my intent is really how do I win a campaign and then get to win another campaign, then you're looking at populist policies as opposed to those policies that are going to carry the country forward. And something you said, I think, is very telling, that yes, there was a unifying sort of force that said, how do we work together in order to do these things? But did we need to lose that just because we didn't have a very clear boogeyman? The reality is we've continued to create new boogeymen, right? Because if you looked at the society that we live in today, do we see greater equality between the have and the have-nots? Or do we just see a new grouping in the elite that has emerged still taking place?
The neocolonialism concept that broke up the clear segregation, like you said, the clear boogeyman, created this concept that says it's all us now, but not really, So I want to talk about those things, and I want to be able to get to guys. I see your telephone calls. It is wild. Please be a part of the conversation. 323-6232, 325-4316, 325-4259, anywhere from the family of islands, 242-300, 242-300, 5720, 242-300, 5720, or hit me up on the text 422-4796. Now, God, I want to break down some stuff. I want to be able to look at the economic engines of the country. I want to talk about Grand Bahama. I want to talk about Abaco. I want to talk more specifically about Nassau and what's happening there. Now, if we look at the gamut of things, if we look at this sort of this trifecta, this three-part engine, Grand Bahama, Abaco, and here in Nassau, we know for a very long time both of Grand Bahama and Abaco have not been necessarily pulling their weight. I want to talk about that. But this administration has come in and really been able to do a number as it relates to the sort of memorandum of understanding, the heads of agreements, the signing numbers. We're seeing coming out of Grand Bahama, coming out of Abaco, $800 million South Abaco development. They signed the heads of agreement in December. They had Serenity Beach Resorts, luxury development that actually already had some things done. A 12-year-old concept and a dream that was revived. They're being able to do some stuff between $508,000 to $2.5 million. Rick Fox, in his particular position as ambassador at large for the Bahamas, is also affiliated with a company that putting in $50 million into the Bahamas for 30 homes of over 3 years, 1,000 homes. This is bananas that's happening out here, and I want to know whether or not we can see from an economic standpoint a turning of the tides. Is this only yet again this populist policies to be able to articulate into our society that these things are happening? Or can we see sort of the track road to make these things happen and see the tangibility thereof for the change that we look for in the country? Talk to me about it.
You know, I'm always excited when I see the interest in the country, because I think sometimes we as Bahamians who live here lose sight of the fact that, we do actually live where literally the sun, sand, and sea and the beauty that we have, but more important, the natural prosperity that is the Bahamas, we sometimes overlook, and it is always outsiders that tend to see it. All of those projects, the first question I will ask you, and is not taking away, because we've always needed foreign direct investment in order to continue progress. We just don't have the size of population to do it solely on our own. But in all of the projects you just mentioned, name one of them where you heard the pitch that Bahamians would have even a fraction of ownership or majority ownership.
None, because we can get to that. Because
right now, and I started that we have to change the mindset from being employee only to being owner, which means we have to put our money where our mouth is, but we also have to be given the opportunity. And when we start talking about political policies and economic policies, is there a problem with saying that, okay, every project that comes to the Bahamas, there has to be a minimum Bahamian participation level, right? Doesn't need to be 50% or 50 plus 1%. But if we started 25%, 15%, that said, now it's not saying that, the project will not be approved if you cannot find other Bahamian participants willing to do so. But if we don't start from the premise of saying, how does the country become greater owners of the very industries that we are promoting, then we are actually only becoming participants and sideline participants, not even participants, spectators in our own economic environment.
That's
and we
why
have enough examples.
I love having conversations with you, because you could hit it straight on the head. Persons become so inundated and feverish with this sort of political commitment and their affiliation that they don't see that we are not participating in the part of this economic growth. That a lot of persons are having conversation as we bring this conversation closer to home here in Nassau. We're seeing now with RCL and with Bahama, RCL and Atlantis having conversation over the proverbial grassroots, over the Bahamians' head about everyone would win. We're sitting here in this sort of a position saying, well, how much jobs is it going to be for me? Can I get a contract out of this? But we want to be able to have a piece of this economic pie to be able to change the course of the country and the position that we've been living in for far too long. Talk to me about it, Gowan. I mean, this is crazy.
No, and the reality is when we look, let's break it down to say that we've misinterpreted the term foreign direct investment to mean foreign direct investor. And the reality is foreign direct investment means using foreign currency inflows in order to develop industries and initiatives. It means that in order for that to be successful, it has to generate foreign currency revenues in order to pay back, whether that's equity or debt, in order to pay back the lender or the shareholder. In a number of these ventures, the actual property that is used to pledge as collateral for the lending that is taking place is the very collateral that we already own. And so when we are looking at governments who sign heads of agreement and who sign these MOUs, the question is, do they have a full appreciation for the economic contribution we are making to a project? Because when we are giving tax concessions, that's an investment. Because if you were to pay me $50 million in taxes that you no longer have to pay, then should I not become immediately as government an equity owner in this?
Absolutely.
business?
100% a part of the entire development of the concept and being able to ensure that the Bahamian people benefit thereof. Man, Gowan, we can get deeper into this. Ladies and gentlemen, I see your telephone calls. Please be a part of the conversation. 323-6232, 325-4316, 325-4259. Anywhere for the family of Islands, 242-300-5720, or hit me up on the text 422-4796. We're talking with none other than Gowan Bowe, really being able to break down some things, be a part of the conversation. We're going to take this quick commercial break and be right back after this.
Foundation. The foundation.
Tired of banks forcing you to use technology to bank the way they want you to? Your convenience is important. So no matter what your banking needs, Commonwealth Bank's friendly staff are always available in branch for that personal one-on-one service. But when you choose technology, our online and mobile banking app offers you state-of-the-art functionality. The choice is yours. Commonwealth Bank. Bank the way you want.
Guardian Radio and the Foundation are on the move.
Bahamas, this one's for you.
SBT, Small Business Thursdays. Every Thursday, the Foundation with Howard Grant will highlight small businesses throughout the country, far and wide. Your products, services, prices, and personality. We want to hear it all. Get your 30 or 60-second advertisement heard on air at a fraction of the cost. We here at the Foundation understand the times and don't want you to be left behind. With Guardian Radio, you reach your specific demographic and it is unmatched.
We reach thousands daily.
Get your products off the shelf and your services in their hearts. Small Business Thursdays with the Foundation, only on Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. For more information, call 302-2300 or the Help Me Howard line at 827-0111. SBT, Small Business Thursdays. Get your business moving today.
At Bahamas Bus and Truck Company Limited, we provide vehicles known for quality and durability. From the iconic Jeep Wrangler to the award-winning Grand Cherokee, we've got your everyday driver covered. For larger tasks, our Ram 1500, Mitsubishi Fuso Canter trucks, CMC Verica vans, and Fuso Rosa jitneys do way more than just deliver. We even carry a wide variety of pre-owned vehicles. To keep you going, our parts, service department, and body shop can accommodate our brands and others. Call us today at 322-1722 or email info@bahamasbus.com.
Ready to step into the future? From your front door to the backyard and everywhere in between. See and speak to whoever's there with Ring Video doorbells and security cameras now available at Alive. Protect what matters most, all from one easy app. Available in your Google or Apple Play Store. Visit bealive.com/ring to learn more. We are Alive.
Tired of paying too many bills and loan payments each month?
Shrink your monthly debt payments down to one easy payment.
with our debt consolidation loan.
It also has a built-in savings that pays you 5% interest.
Inquire about our debt consolidation loans today.
Call 356-7764.
Those food and products are now open in Kenneth Plaza, Prince Charles Drive. Come, you must try the jerk chicken, jerk pork, and all their amazing grilled food. Grilled daily to perfection using all their amazing sauces made right here in the Bahamas. Divania's, grilling good food for life. Call or WhatsApp Divania's today at 817-4468.
This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM.
Foundation. Foundation. The foundation. The foundation.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, 96.9 FM radio. Howard Grant in your company, the foundation, on this beautiful Tuesday. I see my girl Kim out of Grand Bahama celebrating her birthday also. Did I hear somebody say that it's Mighty's birthday? Did I hear somebody say that? Well, happy birthday to you. And my son is actually celebrating. Somebody give me a text just now and says, Howard, you come through in the clutch. 0017. You need to stop it because I'm reading this text and I'm taking a picture of your number. We come and look for you. 0017. Come tell me happy birthday. Let me tell the boy happy birthday. You can tell him you say so. It's a beautiful day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very kindly for tuning in with us, having a good time. Now, listen, I'm talking with Gowan Bone. We're really talking about national development from a socioeconomic standpoint, from a socio-political standpoint, from a standpoint that says that there needs to be a greater awareness locally of our participation in what's happening in the country going forward. That's just what it is. We started to talk about the NDP National Development Plan all the way from 2016 that's been worked on from 2014. But, you know, I want to talk about whether or not there was a blockage. What's stopping our political heads, the heads from leadership, to being able to really enact this? Are we looking at, do you believe that in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, there's going to be this kind of a conversation that says, listen, Bahamianization and the NDP plan would have worked well for the country? I feel like that's what's going to happen. I feel like these concepts and ideas that is birthed in theory that everyone could be able to deduce after they look over it and say, wow, this is great. We should be able to execute this. There is a significant blockage from a political standpoint that says, if we institute this, then there may not necessarily be dependency in this area. If we give an opportunity for this, I mean, wholeheartedly, education, social reform, this sort of a transformation, they may look at us a little different. And there won't be the necessity for being able to have our parties at the forefront. Is that one of the things that we're seeing that you believe, God? Do you believe that this is what we're seeing here? Because I'm afraid of it. I'm afraid that in 20 years, in 2041, we're having a conversation about the concept of what NDP could have been if we had instituted that thing, because we keep talking about Bahamianization.
You know, I certainly believe that's the problem. If we truly want to emancipate our people, then we have to educate and elevate our people. And when we look at, you know, some may say, well, you're saying emancipation. Well, the reality is we have sovereign independence, but do we have economic independence? And do we have what I'm going to call a sort of consensus that the country at large is economically independent, not only as a country, but also as individuals and businesses that operate within it? And we immediately know the answer, because when we look at our financial circumstances as a government, you know, we are hoping that we have good years, because in bad years, our debt to GDP ratios really give us reason to shudder. When we look at the average household and we look at the level of indebtedness, and I think more telling, the level of savings that each of the households has, again, it gives us reason to pause to say, are we living an emancipated life? And the reality is, whilst, slavery had a very clear master, if we are slaves to our own consumerism and slaves to what we are keeping onto ourselves as a result of it, then we've not truly emancipated ourselves, right? And in the song with Bob Marley, he said, "None but ourselves can free our minds," right? And so the National Development Plan is a mechanism by which we free the minds of the citizens. We make them all become aware of what is necessary to change the tides of fortune for us as a country, and then hold to the principle that a rising tide floats all boats. That if we are saying that, we have strong leadership, strong direction, the reality is it is much easier for persons to buy into a vision and a strategy because they actually have a sense of purpose and they actually have a sense of what success looks like. Every time we just throw at you, and you use the example, 1,000 jobs and 500 jobs, let's have a real conversation and say, well, how many jobs do we need to create on an annual basis? So, it generally, I think if I remember the last statistics, we have around 5,000 to 6,000 school leavers on an annual basis, right? So if we are having 5,000 students, a portion of those are going into university, but remember that's looking at high school leavers. So each year we have to add the college graduates, both domestically and international colleges. And so when we talk about how many jobs do we need to create on an annual basis, do you ever see any administration at the end of the year say, these were the number of new persons entering the job market and these were the number of jobs created so that you can do a true comparison?
No. I mean, this is the idealism coming again, because you and I have, we share this in common, right? This is kind of an idealistic society that we see. Technology exists right now. My mother, I can do this, and we got to take a quick commercial break. My mother and I, right? My mother was a former member of parliament in Grand Bahama. I love her to death, right? In 2007 to 2012, she's the member of parliament at Maroc. And she wrote this, she wrote her first presentation in the House of Assembly, and it had references to Ecclesiastes. It had references to all these things. Oh, it's a man of God. I love Jesus. So I look at it and I say, Mommy, listen, the chaplain had already spoken. The chaplain had already gone into the House of Assembly, and it's important and imperative for members of parliament to be able to be very members that exist in their community. You need to speak to your demographic. You need to speak to what's happening in from a development. But my point to you is that we don't see politicians do this across the board. No one. They give you this sort of a glazing over of an idea that can be able to happen, but they give you no statistical data and information. None. And so we're left out here kind of being able to scurry and rummage through what's happening in the Department of Statistics and other divisions, trying to find out numbers to quantify the position that we're in the country. And so because of a lack of technology being instituted, we're in this position that we don't understand what's going on. We have to find out in fragmented information coming through because they are relentlessly in this position to keep information from us. And that's a sad thing. If we have members of parliament, if we have the administration, if we have leadership in this country that says, I want to move the country forward, the very first thing they can do is to be able to break up this monotony of all these books and amalgamate the information one time. Are we going to see that? Do you think we're going to see that? Do you believe that the NDP should be able to incorporate that as we move forward? Talk to me about it, Gowan.
And that's exactly what the NDP's whole foundation was built upon: empirical evidence, studied thought, and reasoned strategy. That it wasn't about giving me an ideology. It was about starting from the position of an ideology and how do we break that down into SMART goals. And we hear the acronym all the time, but specific, measurable, timely, so that it was looking at when we set our national priorities. Yes, we may say that our priority and our vision is going to take us out 25 years, but we need to have the incremental steps that says what happens in 1 year, what happens in year 5, what happens in year 10, 15. And that's what was intended coming out of the National Development Plan. And to your point, to the, I'm going to call them dinosaur politicians, that is frightening. because
scary thing.
you are now giving people information by which to actually objectively judge your stewardship.
That's it. And they are afraid of that. They would rather you being able to identify them and the like of their personality. Well, I like this one. He's a charming guy. Well, this is an approachable person, but they give us no information to say they're actually doing their job. Guys, we're going to take this quick commercial break. We're having a great conversation with Gowan Bo. Please be a part of it. We're going to go to news and get back here. I think Gowan has to leave us at about 1:30. So when I get back, I'm going to take these telephone calls, read a few of these texts, and see if we can be able to dive into the second part of this. Right here on The Foundation, we'll be...
The Foundation. The Foundation. The Foundation.
This is Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas.
At Popeyes, we have a deal worth driving for. It's our shrimp tackle box. Taste a tender and delicious shrimp marinated in our Louisiana spices and fried up fresh and crunchy. Served with our ultimate cocktail dipping sauce, one regular side, and a warm buttery biscuit. Add a blueberry cream cheese pie or a strawberry cream cheese cup to your order. Stop by any Popeyes for your shrimp tackle box today.
Love that chicken from Popeyes.
Ready to step into the future? From your front door to the backyard and everywhere in between. See and speak to whoever's there with Ring Video doorbells and security cameras now available at Alive. All from one easy app. Available in your Google or Apple Play Store. Visit bealive.com/ring to learn more. We are alive.
Jet off to the basketball playoffs with your Scotiabank credit card. You could be courtside in the middle of the action with an all-expenses-paid trip, plus airfare, spending money, and accommodations to the next basketball playoffs. Just apply for any Scotia credit card, spend $120 or more on a purchase, or use our Scotia Select Pay installment plan to win a slam-dunk trip to the next basketball playoffs. Courtesy of your ScotiaCredit.com for more information.
Foundation. Foundation. The Foundation. The Foundation. Foundation.
And we are back live and in full effect, 96.9 FM radio, Guardian Radio, Howard Grant, The Foundation, chopping it down today. Beautiful day, Tuesday, April 18th. Like I said, my son's celebrating the birthday. Happy to do that. I'm headed down to Platinum Pastries to be able to pick up that pina colada cake. I asked him if he wanted a regular thing. Daddy, I want a little pina colada cake. You need to stop. You sound like you wasting them Christian people. No, I don't drink. But give me a piece of round cake. You need to stop. You need to stop it. It's a beautiful day. I want to be able to get right into your conversations. We're sitting with Gowan Bo and really being able to chop down a socioeconomic position. Not as much numbers as you would like. Many of those persons who are inclined to be able to hear the accounting arm of this thing. But I believe for us to be able to right size and really get in alignment with our goals and aspiration, this sort of projection and idea that we need to be able to move towards, especially in this year of our Jubilee, we need to have a clearer conversation of our responsibility. We need to have a clearer conversation about our participation in this whole debacle, this kind of social debacle, that we continue to be able to say that it's the politicians' fault, it's the politicians' fault, it's the political organization's fault, it's the PLP's fault, it's the FNM's fault, but never taking into account our participation, our level of participation. We need to be more clear in our understanding and our application thereof. So, Gowan, let me take this telephone call right off the bat. Caller, you on the line with us live. Go ahead.
Hi, a pleasant good morning, Howard.
Good morning.
Sorry, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How you doing? All's well?
Okay, great. And a pleasant good afternoon, Mr. Gowan. Bo, how are you, sir?
Not too bad yourself?
I'm holding through the grace of God. I'll stick with that. And a pleasant good afternoon to the nation. And listening to the conversation from the outset with yourself and Howard. And before I say anything, let me just thank you, Mr. Bo, for confirming all of the specifics in the conversations that I've been espousing in recent times on Dwight Trivago. And let me say to your last comment, Howard, in terms of the Bahamian people's role in participating to bring about this change. And Gowan sort of alluded to it in his opening speech, where he said that he knows that he's going to catch a lot of flack for what he says. And that is a reality, Howard. That is a reality, Bahamians who are listening via our show. When you have this level of thinking, when you have this technocratical approach to resolving issues, to highlighting the wrongs, the misinformation, the discrepancies in the approach, the weaknesses in the approach, when you have the mindset to see it and to also acknowledge it and to also put in place a recommendation for a roadmap as to how you get to where you need to be, people don't like you for that. People don't like you, and you have many instances where people will try to railroad you, they will try to isolate you, they will try even to victimize you. And I'm certain Mr. Bo could speak to that from his level, although it may not impact his level as much as my level, right? For those who get what I'm saying. But Mr. Bo, you have the numbers being needed to guide and direct how we create policy, which will tell the real story of how we are truly performing in this country. And if we are truly performing to standard, which would increase the tide as the tide increase, which would benefit all persons in the country, or we are performing at a minority level or at a miniature level, and the performance needs to be upgraded, because the bottom line is this: if we are performing, if we are going by the numbers and where we need to be, we would recognize immediately that we don't have the time to be beating up our mouth in Parliament whenever we see a little growth, because we would recognize that little growth is not where we need to be in order to impact positively the entire nation. We would recognize that we need to change the model of the negotiations for the heads of agreement. We would recognize immediately that we need to have national development plans as it relates to how we're going to develop this country, how we're going to ensure that Bahamians benefit from the development of our country. And if you recall, Howard, we were just having similar conversations on your show over the last, month or so, where I have been participating as it relates to national infrastructural development, capital development, foreign direct investment, development in our country to ensure that Bahamians can get a real seat at the table. And now we've only recognized, how would I land on this point? How we've only recognized from the Salinan Finland and Arthur Dion Han. I must acknowledge him because he was the father of Bahamianization. How we've only recognized majority rule in our country, but we have not realized majority economic rule as yet, and that is where the real independence is. We need to get to work. We have a lot of work to do, and we need to change this petty, vindictive mindset where we try to spitefully fight against people who have the vision and who can help our country to advance rather than working with them. Thank you for the opportunity, and God bless.
Thank you, man. Thank you so very kindly. I think that's a sentiment that exists, Gowan, for a lot of persons listening into the conversation, that there needs to be transformation. But the one thing that we don't talk about much, and I don't know whether or not this is my good, decent friends. I know all these politicians, but a lot of them have been kind of standoffish because the first thing that I want to talk about here on this show, The Foundation, I did a lot of sort of this self-reflection. I really looked deep and say, what does this show need to be about? And one of the things I came up with is to talk about the strength in our conviction in our community, the strength and conviction that we have in politics to be able to make a decision and see the country moving in a particular direction. So a lot of the conversations, you see a preamble of conviction and even draw comparison to whether or not we have these particular convictions. We lack that. Politically, a lot of persons, like you started to give the contrast between the politically, from a socialist standpoint, we could talk about convictions and being able to have this. But when we're given the opportunity to sit in this position as your political organization, the first thing we see come to the forefront is capitalism, the concept and idea of being able to get more for me, give me me. So I want to talk about that. I want to be able to talk about those things. I think this is a general sentiment. But what do you think it'll take to take this from a theoretical idea of what needs to happen in the country to practical application to see the transformation on the ground, this conviction that we speak of?
You know, it's interesting because you started by saying what unified us in the past, and we had recent experience when we had the VAT debate, because, you know, you had everyone saying, what, a significantly new tax, and there was unification that took place in that one, and that matured from what was opposite to resistance to education, to ultimately embracing and saying, but use it appropriately, right? And we continue to lose the momentum when we do these things from time to time. If we look, and this is not, you know, unique to the administration, if we look over the last, I'm going to say 10 years, how many times do we see purely combative stances in the public domain, right? Where there are persons who say, well, I've reached the end of my rope and now I'm taking some form of demonstration or some form of civic action in order to spur the movement on. And to be honest, the political leaders should realize that it is far better to work with the various industry stakeholders across various industries, across various communities that you refer to, as sitting in your ivory towers, making a pronouncement over your select information that's come from your select crew.
Select committee, yes.
You know, starting to say, well, have a mechanism for the feedback. Now, yes, we understand that, you know, you can't have, you know, if you are waiting for unanimity, right, you're not going to get that. And we understand that. But to your point, there is a consensus building. And to be honest with you, the more and more that I engage with persons, you know, everywhere, it is always around something you ask, how do we get this transformation? You know what the general viewpoint is? We have to have the new leaders. And the viewpoint is this, that we've had this mindset always of the Moses, right, to take us out of Egypt. But do we have the Joshuas that are carrying us into the promised land?
You know, hold on. Gowan, my good, decent friend. You've been talking for years. And every time we get to this juncture, I participate and put my hand up and say, I nominate Gowan Bowe. Huh? Talk to me. Talk to me. And you have relentlessly stepped back from this participation outside of the private sector. You've done a wonderful job. You've done a wonderful job in the private sector, but we may necessarily need you in our communities. When will we see Gowan Bowe, a man that has relentless conviction to be able to stand up to these things and be very clear with an understanding that he may not be liked for being able to be truthful, participate in this particular thing? Talk to me, Gowan.
And I said to you on the personal note, that's one that is a family decision that has to say that, you know, it has put them in a situation where they're comfortable with my absence. And why I say absence is because we have so many things to address that you truly are going to be putting country first. And you, as a married man with children, you know that don't always go.
No. That don't go off a Kyle at all. Where you going?
So, you know, but from that perspective, I think sometimes we see the need for the contributors to be on the front line. When, you know, you hear the statements, kings and kingmakers, right? That there are persons in the background, and it is about saying that not everyone needs to be on the front line, but those who are on the front line have to be secure in their position or secure enough in their positions to say, I actually get the right advisors behind me, not those who are politically aligned, who are, well, I'm going to use the term sycophants and will never say no to me, but rather put around me the advisors who have the skill sets. The reality is that the great leaders of the day won't say to you that they had all the answers. What they were competent and confident in is, I can get the person who has the answers to work with me. And so, that's evading your question. And so that'll show you
I realize
have
that you do
politics in my blood.
I realize what you
but,
do. You need to stop it. You need to stop it.
When I carry that forward, put it this way, I recognize from a family perspective, meaning heritage and otherwise, that I have a great contribution I have to make to the country. How I do so can come in many forms.
You know what?
Yes.
Say this. I feel like you were sort of crystallized in this concept of your non-participation, your participation from the private sector. But now I see you becoming a little bit more pliable. So we're hoping with time that you would be able to open yourself to an idea of, full-fledged participation in this particular thing. Gowan, you are a really talented person. I look over the gamut of persons who can participate to national growth and development, that stands with conviction, that wants to do the right thing and is not swayed by any political organization to be able to take care of themselves. There's a couple names I called. And I said, I'd love to serve with Gowan Bowe. I'd love to serve with Warren McCartney. I'd love to serve in these particular areas. There are some people in our society who can participate, who ain't looking for nothing. And I believe that you're one of those persons. So I won't put that in your hat. Wife a little bit later on, and then all right,
that's what I was just going to tell you. Once you know who
I know
the
what to do.
is.
I'm a married man. I know you got to go carry it to the wife. So carry it to your wife, and you're going to talk about it. Let me take the next telephone call. Call you on the telephone. Go ahead. Go ahead. Call you on with us live. No, let's get the next caller. Caller, go ahead. You're on with us live.
Good morning, Mr. Good afternoon, Mr. Grant.
Good afternoon, my brother. What's happening?
Good afternoon, Mr. Bowe. Firstly, let me say, Mr. Bowe, thank you very much for your always very informative, educated, considered opinion on the economy and otherwise in our country. You always do an excellent job. I particularly support your position with regard to ownership and equity participation for us, particularly as it relates to foreign direct investors. As we look into the hospitality, we look into the orange economies, and you may know that during the discussions of the National Development Plan, some of us were adamant about including the orange economy in that plan, so much so that we were able to get, I think, the final pillar to deal specifically with it. And so to that end, I'd like for you to just comment on the need to perhaps maybe even consider the old policy of Bahamianization, where it is mandatory for those foreign direct investors to include Bahamians or Bahamian entities as participants and equity holdings. I believe we have come full circle, and it's now time for our government, respective, to insist that Bahamians have ownership in the operations and not just be satisfied with some jobs that may be offered, and most of them at the lower end of the user.
Thank you, Gowan. I just want to touch this before you dive into that.
Yeah, and to me, I am certainly one that is an advocate for saying that we have to promote ownership. And the way we do so is by actually setting economic policies that are clear. I do believe that there should be a minimum requirement for Bahamian participation in major projects that take place, particularly in those industries that we see as critical to our growth and development. It also comes with responsibility and obligations on our side, that it is not about a free lunch. It is not about being said that the investors come in must now give 25% ownership to a Bahamian group, but rather this is the investment that is required, and we each participate equally, not necessarily always through in-kind or in cash donation, but sometimes in-kind donations or contributions to the equity model. The reality is we have sufficient intellect in our country that says when we sit down and look at business transactions and deals that take place, there is a way to carve out how equity participation takes place. And let me go back to something I said earlier. When the government says it is granting concessions, tax concessions, it is granting land concessions, it is granting employment concessions, etc. All of those are lost aspects that have value. It should be seen as how do we take what is government's contribution into most of these projects and monetizing that, but taking it outside of the hands of government. And why do I say that? Putting it into independently managed structures. So we saw recently, and it wasn't new, the concept of the sovereign wealth fund, the concept of being able to pool the resources of the country so that we have greater might. What we also need to do is we need to start teaching our persons the old concept of ASU, which is how do we pool resources so that when these investment opportunities come about, there's an immediate ability to start putting funds into them. In the beginning, it is going to be those persons who have savings. But the truth of the matter is they're the ones who are ready to take advantage. But as people understand that your money earns money when you sleep, when you're an owner, versus when you're only an employee, you only earn money when you're working. That persons will then see that, okay, I work to earn money, but I need to earn money to save, and I need to save to be able to invest, and I invest in order to build wealth. So to the caller's point, we teach our citizens how to become entrepreneurs in the mindset that I don't need to own 50 plus 1%. If I have 0.001% of a company, but that company is earning $100 million, that's still a good piece of money that's coming to me after me just simply having a contribution into that. But the government of the Bahamas, and one of the things in the National Development Plan, well, actually the State of the Union, Howard, less than 20% of foreign direct investment stays within the country, right? That was empirically studied and set out in the State of the Nation. So, when we start talking about this, think about it this way. If a person is coming from outside with a bag of money and investing in a venture, when they leave the country, what is happening with that bag of money? It is also leaving with them.
Absolutely.
Whereas if persons are coming in with a bag of money and they're meeting other Bahamians with a similar bag of money, not as individuals, but potentially pension plans, potentially funds, potentially sovereign wealth fund, all of the mechanisms that say, well, okay, it is far easier for me to get a grouping of 1,000 people that have $1,000 that make $1 million than it is finding 2 people that have $1 million. And so the reality is we have to take ownership and responsibility initiatives by the horns and say, well, we have to be ready to do so. And then we can turn to government to say, well, facilitate it taking place. What we cannot do is stifle progress by saying every venture must have Bahamian participation when Bahamians themselves are not ready to participate, because we lose development. So we have to marry opportunity with preparation.
They're ready to receive, but not necessarily ready to participate in the development, growth, and being able to ensure that there's sustainability in these areas. I think we've become conditioned as a society to be able to say, man, throw something my way, as opposed to being able to understand our value and being able to work for it. That is where sustainability comes in. And that is where the sustainability of corruption actually sneaks in, because we're not willing to work for these things. We got to talk about that. I'm going to take a next telephone call. Calling on the line with us live, go ahead. Go ahead, calling on the line with us live. No? Next caller. Calling on the line with us live. Go ahead.
Howard, good afternoon.
Hey, what's up, Jeff?
Right here, man. Good afternoon, Gowan.
Hey, all is well?
All is well, sir. Firstly, Howard, let me go on record to say thank you so much for bringing such a consummate professional as Gowan onto this radio broadcast today.
Absolutely.
Bahamians are very much, we need to have that financial advice. And I must thank him for freely giving up the information and actually teaching us simultaneously on some of the aspects on how we can become financially buoyant. And so, because right now, we do have majority rule in this country, but we do not have financial or economic rule in this country, sadly to say. My question, Gowan, would be simply this. over the years we have heard and we learned that the foreign investor has been given so much concessions from our government. And however, being respectful in saying that, yes, we as Bahamians are not all fully aware of what's being signed into these heads of agreements and so on and so forth. So we don't have a true appreciation per se for the majority of the negotiations that would have taken place. Would it be I would say not irresponsible, but would it be realistic to say that when we enter into these heads of agreement, taking into the considerations, in most cases, the millions of tax concessions that we as the average Bahamians still have to pay, but the foreign investor is not paying these concessions for whatever agreement has been made. Is it reasonable then, sitting around the table, to have a stake in the operation or operations that's coming to the country, whereas the employee, who is although they are responsible for helping to derive the profits for these companies, also have a stake in terms of shares into the operation under the auspices of the government. In other words, what I'm saying is, many of us have worked for many of these entities for 10, 20, 30 years. But yet, at the end of the day, when we leave, we either leave with the 4%, especially if you're in the hospitality industry, you leave with little or nothing. How about we now create a residual income that, regardless of whether we are still with that entity working on a day-to-day basis or not, but because of our stake in it for giving those years over into that entity, that the government would then enter into a share program where our people will still be empowered financially, even if they're not with the entity after they would have served. I think we have to now think outside of the box and really start to protect the Bahamian people's financial interests, saying that we are giving up so much and we are still even what we are even entitled to or what we should be given as our dedication and loyalty to these operations. I just want to hear your input on that, please.
Thank you so much, man, Jeff. I appreciate you. Thank you so very kindly.
And I'd say to you on that one, that's what I've said all along, that the government is actually an equity participant in most of these transactions, but without the shares at the end of the day. And this is where, and Howard will smile because I say it oftentimes, this is where we get into sending the fellas with the collect bottle into a gunfight. That the reality is when you're sitting down and negotiating, if you don't have the economic analysis and the equilibrium models that allow you to quantify and value the actual concessions being granted, then you give away something that you don't even have a true appreciation of its value. That when you look and say, well, me foregoing taxes, okay, well, the other side is saying, if I forego these taxes, they're going to bring this amount of GDP growth. Well, we can mathematically determine whether that makes sense. So if I'm giving you $100 million in concession on taxes on the upfront, and you're adding, only $100 million in GDP growth, well, the tax rate in the country we know is roughly about 20%. So really all I'm getting is $20 million a year. So that's going to be 5 years. But after 5 years, in actually benefiting if you're constantly getting these tax concessions. So the mathematics is not overly complex. The assumptions, the forward-looking, the discounting, those become more complicated. But concessions should be very, very simple. That what I give up, I get more in return. And if the answer is I don't get more in return, either through the economic benefit that is spread across the citizens that I'm charged with representing, or through my own equity participation, then I've actually signed a bad deal. And if it is purely on employment aspect of it, then we have sold ourselves short. So that's what I've been saying all along, that whenever we go into transactions, whenever we understand that a business venture is wanting to be set up in the Bahamas, always appreciate one thing. Money is like water. It finds the opening. And so the fact that money is coming to the country for these investments is not by happenstance. It is because the investors see the opportunity to make a profit. So we have to be thinking in the same way. If you can see the profit, then how do we see the profit for ourselves as well? And don't get into quarter bell, they can give me 200 jobs because at the end of the day, those 200 jobs, I could map out and say, the reality is it is better you pay me the taxes and I'll go hire the people, as opposed to I give up.
God, when I'm listening to you, and the one thing that pops up to me is that when you enter in a negotiation and you present yourself desperate, even in your demeanor, your stance, your position, just like you said, the money will find those particular cracks. The reason why it finds the crack that exists here in the country is because of the desperation that exude out into the universe. We need you to come here. We need you to do these particular things. And the Bahamian government has not been able to create, what I've seen, this sort of negotiations that always empowers the Bahamian people. It always leaves us with a short end of the stick, even if we start to look at this concept and idea that exists for, let's talk about Airbnb, just for 2 seconds. Airbnb is now being taxed. You find Mark Zuckerberg, you find all these people to ensure that you tax the Bahamian people and get those monies back to the Bahamas, but never looking at a way that the individual person who put on that little piece to their house, who had to break out a room, who had to do these particular things, because of the economic deprivation that exists in the country, had to make a very significant decision amongst their family. The government doesn't consider that. The Bahamian people are always left on the outside as it relates to what needs to happen going forward. We're always left out in the cold and found that we have to be taxed and have found that we have to do these particular things for the survival and the buoyancy of our GDP, the buoyancy of our economy, without being able to take into consideration for the next investor that's coming on, the investment that's coming into the country. And so it goes right back to conviction. It goes right back to sort of a policy that's overarching to say that this is where the country needs to be. And I really want to be able to say, this is where we need to see the NDP coming in. This is where we see the plan being able to be executed accordingly. Now, listen, it's 1:30.
Yeah, I see the ones there, and I can give you the 5 additional minutes, right? In case you have
It's a decent man. I just was about time.
But let me just specifically set out to that one, which is something that is there. We often, and you hear it all the times from our politicians, from our industry participants, and generally from Bahamians at large, that the goalposts always keep changing with the OECD, EU, and all of these alphabet soup elements, right? And we play the victim and we say, woe is us. Ask persons who are trying to invest, Bahamians and international persons, if there are goalposts when they go into the negotiations with government. And you just made a very clear statement without realizing that it should be codified. It should be in policy. And something that is little known about the National Development Plan, that there was a proposal to actually have this enshrined in legislation, which would carry it to, it could not easily be discarded, right? Because it would have been legislation. But I use that only to drive home that, our investment policy in the Bahamas is who I sit down to the table with. You can't pull out and clearly see these are the parameters that you as an investor, whether you be Bahamian or international, these are the parameters that you have to adhere to. And each and every time it is always about who do I know? And to your point about corruption, and what I'm going to say, facilitation payments and facilitation contributions, et cetera, is always, well, if I get to the right person who can sell my story to the right set of people, then I get through. And we often don't have, to the caller's point, a sufficient documentation of each of these heads of agreements to say, well, what is it in financial terms that we've committed into these projects? And how are we getting it back? So let's do the cost-benefit analysis for every single investment opportunity that is granted and permitted in the country. And if we start getting along those lines, again, it goes back to the detailed information, then we would be saying, well, who is it that we send in to negotiate? Okay. And we may stop this aspect of saying, well, these persons are all knowing simply because they were elected, and start saying, well, you know what? If we even have to pay fees in the private sector, which is not fully on staff, we do so. But you know what? We put it as a success fee, that we're saying that, look, the reason we are willing to pay you X amount of dollars is because you will improve the station in life that we will have when we come out of these negotiations.
Yes.
And I can tell you, I've sat with some of these ones with the foreign investors where government has asked me to participate. And each one of them, you know what stuns them is because I start by saying, well, give us the numbers so we can work through it. And each of them look at me like saying, well, who are you? And why did you come about?
Because that's not how negotiation starts.
That's not how it works.
That's negotiation. The concept and idea, Gowan, that actually goes out to the universe for third world countries and how negotiations start is that you pay for expedience. That's what they do. They come here with a subconscious expectation to pay for the expedience to get what they want. That's where the corruption comes in. But if someone's there that holds up a standard, lifts up the standard and say, bring the numbers, bring these particular things, and we make a deduction whether or not this is a good investment for the country, then they got to look at you funny. What's this?
And the one thing I'll tell you is look across the table. They don't walk in without their well-paid advisors.
They got them. They got them. They got their advisors. They got their particular persons. Gowan, I'm going to take one more telephone call, and I know you got to go. Ladies and gentlemen, Gowan definitely has to go. I thank you so much for giving me the next. Let me take this telephone call real quick because I have so many persons on the line. Call on the line. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Howard. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Mr. Bo. I really had something that I'd like for him to answer, but he mentioned something very crucial to him. The fact that we don't have a watchdog or judiciary committee in these meetings with these investors, right? But I wanted to ask Mr. Bo two questions. Does the government invest the Bahamian people money, like on a financial market, like to make money? And then, is there any data on inflation and how it affects the economy? I mean, a certain amount of inflation, I guess, will reduce consumption because I see they're using the word degrowth in COVID-19 in the World Economic Forum book. But then I see inflation as just a way. I see it as benefiting the government, like because let's say if an item costs $1 and now it costs $3 because of inflation, the government collects more what? But I'm not hearing any data on that. They're collecting more money, but I'm not hearing any information on that. And we know they're being shortchanged according to the work permits. If they're saying people paying $400 instead of $6,000, $7,000 for skilled workers. So I don't know. We're up against a wall.
Well, let me answer those two quickly. The first one is government investing our money. The answer is very clearly no, because government ultimately is in a net borrowing situation each year and not actually valuing the concessions and things going in so that they're getting economic return. Is it that they are, I'm going to say consciously not investing the monies? No, I think they have, but they have not yet learned to work in an environment like the private sector that says I make decisions based on cost-benefit analysis. The last point, and this is not me holding brief for anyone, is the misperception that inflation benefits the government. If an item previously cost $1, it now costs $3, but you only ever had $5, right? Instead of getting 5 items, you only getting 1.5. And the truth of the matter is that whilst the price of items have gone up and therefore the tax on the individual item, spending still is constrained by the actual purchasing power of the individuals. And this is where, and Howard can shoot me because this is where I believe with the greatest controversy is as long as we have a consumption-based system that says you pay your share of taxes based on your consumption as opposed to your ability to pay, we will always have regression in our progress. And the reality is that we have to move ourselves to a basis of taxation that says you pay on your ability to pay, as opposed to trying to help the lower income by giving concessions that the upper income also have.
So essentially income tax is what you're saying.
Essentially that, and whilst we as Bahamians run from it, bear in mind that I am not saying income tax on top of what we have. I think that's where I always get, the critics back at me saying, Bo always preaching this. I am not talking about tax addition. I am talking about tax reform. That right now we have a system that is unduly burdensome on those who have least and unduly favorable to those who have most. And we need a system that balances that equation so that you pay based on your means and your ability to pay, not on your consumption.
Gowan, I want to thank you so much, man. You're a good, decent man. I really am. There's a lot of persons texting and says, man, Howard, you need to have another show with Gowan, please. there needs to be more genuine tested professionals to make government successful in terms of their participation. So these are texts coming through, Godwin. I thank you so very kindly, man, for your convictions, for your consistency over the years, and being able to speak truth to power in these matters and letting the Bahamian people know that there is a better way. One of the things that made me smile and chuckle just now when you said that government you believe that these guys have the greatest of intention. And we know that the road that is paved, talk to me, the tar that exists thereof that goes to hell is paved with the thickest of great intentions. But we know it still leads the same place. It still leads the same place. So beyond the intentions, we need the application and the conviction to make those decisions. I thank you, my brother. I thank you so very kindly for participating. You know him. Godwin, I thank you. And I also want to thank Fidelity for being able to participate here on the show and being a sponsor and doing some stuff with us. We're looking for you guys to do some stuff with us on Small Business Thursdays to really put out there how you can be able to reform your business. So thank you, my brother. Thank you so very kindly. Thank you for letting me teach for a couple more minutes of your time and being able to participate like that.
Always a pleasure, Howard. And let the texter know you have my number. So we just have to work it out.
Absolutely, my brother. Thank you, my brother.
All righty, man. Have a good one.
Have a good day. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Gowan Bo. Great conversation. We're going to take this quick commercial break right here on The Foundation and be right back after this.
Foundation. The Foundation.
The Foundation with Howard Grant. We'll be back right after this.
The Foundation. The Foundation. The Foundation.
Sweet and heat meet Burger King Nassau. Introducing the new Mango Habanero King that features a signature mango habanero sauce, 2 flame-grilled beef patties, 2 slices of cheese, bacon, and spicy jalapenos, all on a toasted sesame seed bun. Enjoy the Mango Habanero King in a combo or ask for the plant-based version. Either way, this sandwich offers just enough sweet to bring on the heat. The new Mango Habanero King from Burger King Nest is king.
At Bahamas Bus and Truck Company Limited, we provide vehicles known for quality and durability. From the iconic Jeep Wrangler to the award-winning Grand Cherokee, we've got your everyday driver covered. For larger tasks, our Ram 1500, Mitsubishi Fuso Canter trucks, CMC Verica vans, and Fuso Rosa jitneys do way more than just deliver. We even carry a wide variety of pre-owned vehicles. To keep you going, our parts, service department, and body shop can accommodate our brands and others. Call us today at 322-1722 or email info@bahamasbus.com.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
Foundation. Foundation. The Foundation.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, 96.9 FM radio. Howard Grant in your company. The beautiful day today, really being able to chop it down. Listen, man, I'm always grateful to great men and women that actually sit with us. That's one of the things that I think we have sufficient of, but not necessarily being able to utilize it. It's almost like those drums of water that your grandmother used to collect around the house. I don't know if your grandma did it. My grandmother did it. She would always, given the time and the era that she came from, always collect rainwater, right? Which was wild. Collect rainwater, but never utilize it. You know, eventually she would find her way to being able to water the flowers or the trees or so forth and so on with it. But we have a significant amount of conviction and very clear understanding of where the country needs to go that's being collected, but not necessarily utilized. Can I say that? Is that the comparison that I wanted to do? No, there is a need, a desperate need for being able to identify this proverbial water to be able to water the nation so we can see the growth that we expect. Come on, I pull it together just now? We need to be able to see that. Right? And one of the persons that I've always identified, there's some people that you'll see me be able to lean on more than others to come here to have this kind of a conversation because I share their sentiments. I share their sentiments and this sort of the idea that we need to move in a particular direction. You know, Gowan Bo has always been one of those persons that has been very transparent and down to earth. A lot of persons are elevated even articulately. the way that they articulate linguistically to be able to break down these things to let you know that I've gone off to school. They might even put a little twang to the thing to sound like it's just too much. I can't deal with it. Are we going to have a very clear conversation about where we are in this country without you being able to give us this kind of a hint that I'm smarter than everyone? That's all I want. All nation that say that this is where we are as a nation. All I want is to be able to hear your conviction, to say whether or not with clarity that some of the decisions that have been made has not necessarily supported the growth and development of who we are as a nation. And I've always been able to get that from Gowan. And there's some other persons that I've gotten it from also. There are some politicians, it's very difficult to find that in politics because the nature of politics, you have to almost be a chameleon to exist in that particular space. We talked about the duality that exists thereof that says, in the spirit of convenience, we need to talk about capitalism when it's convenient and good for us to be able to see the growth thereof. But when it's time for me to be able to get your support, we need to be able to talk about socialism. This is wild. There's inconsistency in these areas. And so we need to be able to find that language and application of consistency to be able to say that this is the course to chart to find some things happen. I agree with Gowan. One of the things that we need in this country, and I've been scribbling straight through his conversation, man, I enjoyed that entirely. Every time I sit with him, it's a wonderful conversation. One of the conversations that, one of the things that kind of popped out to me is his indication that we need new leaders. That's heavy, man. That is heavy. That is heavy. I don't believe that is leading to this sort of a disharmony between the private sector and the government sector. I believe that this transparency should activate those who have this kind of conviction and position to say that it's time for me to step up. I believe that there should be at least some social sensitivity to understand that it is time to step in this kind of position. I believe that. And I believe that if you're listening to these things and you're able to follow the conversation and understand exactly what needs to happen and even agree with Gowan Bow and others that says that this is what there is time. It is time. It's time. And what better time than now? What better time than now? That yesterday is gone and tomorrow is not promised. What better time than now for us to participate in our own growth and development in this country? I like that. And one of the things I wanted to kind of pop out to that actually stood out to me is this concept and idea of Bahamianization. The caller called to talk about Bahamianization policy. I mean, I think that that's where one of the issues exists for us. We're still wrapped up in the idea that this was a policy, right? We're still wrapped up in the idea that this is law or something. This was just theoretical conversation of what needs to happen. And in the spirit of the fact that we gravitated towards it as a community and did not see it applied by any one of the PLP administrations, more specifically, it speaks birthed under the PLP will not happen. Talk to me. Let's shoot clear with the thing. Let's shoot straight right down the middle with the thing. Talk to me. Right? The same concept that exists for Bahamianization, how we theorize about the idea that this is such a great policy, all this was a bunch of words that someone said that made sense, and the Bahamian people gravitated to it because it spoke in the language. It wasn't highbrow enough for us. It spoke directly to the people and to the hearts of the people, and that is where it lives. In the spirit and the hearts of the Bahamian people, but not on paper, not in law. And there has been no PLP dispensation, political administration that made the thing happen. But you keep carrying on with the conversation that we are the organization for the people. We are the this, we are the that. And here again, we're finding the administration in position and in power to be able to activate the National Development Plan, but lacking the conviction. Lacking the power to be able to make that decision. You can do it, it's light work. But making that decision empowers the Bahamian people. And hold on, we can't stand an empowered man. We don't know what to do with him or her. That's the layout is. I believe that that's the square root of the conversation. The base of it. The sap and the pulp of it. We cannot be liberated in our thinking. Because if we do so, it will change the country and change the dynamics of the quote unquote families who remain at the pinnacle of the ivory tower that we often speak of. Let's be very clear with this thing, man. The only way that we could break down these proverbial walls of Jericho is marching, not in silence, but with that kind of determination and with a loud shout. Move in unity to change the dynamics of what's happening here. This monopoly that exists at the top needs to come down because it lacks innovation, it lacks creativity, it lacks inclusion, it lacks, and it cannot feed us. We've just merely been surviving as a society, as a community. But, every 5-year cycle, we celebrate these people. Oh my God, it's the best. We got to stop it. Last few minutes before we get out of here, let me take this telephone call. Caller, you on the line with us live, go ahead. Caller, you on the line with us live, go ahead.
Hey, Howard.
Hey.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Look, hey, boy, I was hoping I forgot it while I was communicating with Gowan, right? Mm-hmm. But it came to me after, and so I still thought it was worth the while to call and put it in the atmosphere. Look, one of the most important implementations that, and I'm hopeful that Gowan is still listening. One of the most important implementations that we can do as it relates to heads of agreements or any kind of agreements with foreign direct investors in our country, when we are looking at, well, in addition to what Gowan has expressed, which is the same as what I've been expressing over the last 20 years, is we need to add a scale. We need to implement a scale into our concessions, into the assets that we provide, into the tax breaks that we provide for these investors, and that scale would save us exactly the way Gowan was describing when he spoke to the matter. Because if your performance is only at 80% of what we negotiated, then your benefits reduce to 80% of what we negotiated. If you are not holding true to the amount of opportunities or jobs that we expected based on a negotiation, then your benefits reflect that, and you pay that back into the country in taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To achieve that level of negotiation, we will continue to find losses at every step of the way. And finally, Howard, one more thing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. And as it relates to ownership in our country, now, you were saying something about the PLP, and I was on another call, and so I didn't catch what you were saying, and so I can't say whether I agree
I
or
thought
not
you need
with
to
you,
stop.
right? But what I can say is that we have a new prime minister, right? We have a first-time prime minister in our country, but someone who's not new to politics, right? And I believe that Mr. Davis is the right person to bring about these status quo, these humongous decision-making status quo moves that are necessary in order to lift the scales off of our proverbial economic eyes and bring about a new generation of wealth opportunities in our country for Bahamians first and foremost.
Thank you, my brother.
I would end with that. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you, my brother. I know you ain't gonna leave without an opportunity to be able to talk about those things. I am anytime I talk about any political organization, more specifically the PLP, I know that we're gonna have this sort of a social pushback. But we are where we are as a result of 70 years of this particular organization being in power, 50 years of the other organization being in power. We're still looking around us and seeing the stagnation that exists. So let's just be very clear about this, right? The square root of the conversation is that there needs to be new leadership. That's it. And not just new faces, new leadership. And not just these new faces that's been taught and the concept of yesteryear stuffed down their esophagus to be able to regurgitate to the people. So you're hitting us with the 1973 talking points, but you seem to be a new face. We're talking about new leadership that understand globally where we are and where we need to go. I want to thank you so very kindly for being able to participate in the show today and being a part of that. It says, Bo is correct. A cost-benefit analysis needs to be included in any concessions given to other foreign investments in our country, and the benefits should always outweigh the cost that we incur. This is absolutely correct. This is Hey Cuz Howard. I really appreciate you having Mr. Bo on today in your show, explaining my view of the government's not understanding how to negotiate. We've been talking like this for a very long time. Let's dive into deeper these conversations. I thank you so much for participating. Tomorrow, we're going to have Dazzy in the house. Oh, Daz Bennaby, we're going to talk about some other things from her perspective and from a community perspective, how we could be able to make some things happen. 96.9 FM radio. Howard Grant and your company. Absolutely gorgeous day. Go out there. Your car probably just as dirty as mine. Thank you guys for participating and being a part of that. Like I said, happy birthday to my son, Destin Grant. He's 17 this year. So I'm very happy and grateful to the Father that he's still with us and thriving and moving in the space that the Father has called him to. I pray that he continues to be able to enjoy and celebrate and see 190,000 more of these birthdays and lives forever. He's my son. I love him very much. And I just pray that you guys say a soft prayer. If you're celebrating a birthday, happy birthday to you also. Hey, great. Stick and stay for Shivago Lang with Z Live right after the See you tomorrow, guys.